Hi everybody, welcome to our lesson for today. Today we're going to talk about life in the age of industry. So our objectives and standards, to summarize what life was like for people during the Industrial Revolution, to analyze the significance of urbanization, and also we'll try to compare the positives and negatives of the Industrial Revolution. So here's our standards as well. And our desired result, what was life like during the Industrial Revolution? So changing ways. Industrialization changed life for people across the world in many different ways. One of the positives is that people began to earn higher wages in factory jobs. But a negative counter to that would be the pollution from factories led to unhealthy conditions and sometimes dangerous working conditions. People could lose fingers or arms or even their life in factories. And labor, like we said, and talking about dangerous conditions, was hard and stressful. Now, the rise of cities. With the rise of industry came the rise of cities as well. So people moved to the cities from the countryside for jobs and factories. And as people obviously move to these cities for jobs, we begin to see cities rise in terms of buildings and population. And this rise of cities in terms of buildings and population is known as urbanization. Okay, and that's one of our key vocab words for this unit as well. So living in the industrial age. So with the rise of cities came the decline of living conditions. Um, Cities didn't have the necessary sanitary conditions that they do today sometimes. So cities lacked proper sanitation, and there was little protection from crime. Housing was cramped, with families frequently living in one bedrooms, and sickness was widespread. So take a glimpse at this picture here. You can see, obviously this is a woman taking care of a child that may be very sick, or hopefully not passed away here. But you can see families sleeping on the ground here, and you just see there's a lot of clutter, just very cramped living conditions, living in like a one-bedroom type room here. And this was the situation for many people who lived in the cities at this time. Now, also another problem besides living in dangerous city conditions was working in the industrial age. So to increase production, factory owners kept their machines running as much as possible. Workers typically worked 14-hour shifts almost every day, and a lot of times children were actually used to work in factories as well, because there was schooling, but a lot of people needed their children to work in these factories to support paying the bills or paying the rent. So a lot of times we even had children, some even as young as 5 or 6, working in factories to support their families. And children were frequently used to put their hands into tight holes in machines to get loose, or to get loose nuts or bolts, or reach something that might have been caught in the machine. If the machine caught suddenly started back up again, well, that child could be killed or crushed or even have their hand or fingers ripped off. So it was not a pleasant situation for anyone. But again, many people went to go work in these factories because they were better wages than working on the farms. Like we were talking about too, is factories were dirty and machines were very dangerous, and there was no government programs to protect workers, excuse me, if they got hurt. So, for example, say that you got injured on the job at a factory, and you had to be off work because maybe you've crushed your foot or your hand, and you could go back to work in 2 weeks. Well, there was no program to protect you. You might be let go by that factory or that company because the company or the factory was not required to keep you, and there was no unemployment insurance or really health insurance to help support you or your family. And especially if you were killed on a factory job, businesses were not required to give your family members any money for that. So although poverty was widespread, the Industrial Revolution helped increase wealth as well. Many are going to belong to a new social class known as the middle class. Again, like we said, here's another example of one of our vocab words here, so middle class. It's going to include people like skilled workers, professionals, business people, and wealthy farmers as well. So we'll begin to see the rise of the middle class. And this picture here says the emerging middle class in England. The middle class soon became more powerful than landowners and aristocrats, and they also began to look on those in the business world as disgusting. They felt that maybe they were above them. Now, later on, they'll all be considered as equals, and we'll also see the rise of a larger middle class, the upper middle class, which also emerged, that consisted of government workers, doctors, lawyers, and managers. Another thing to keep in mind that is with the working class, that they're going to see very little improvements in their lives. Just as we talked about, how they're living kind of dirty, unsafe, dangerous conditions, working very long hours, very unhealthy hours, that some of them are going to become so frustrated with this lack of change that many of them will actually smash machines in factories, and some of them will actually go on riots. Like you'll see here, this is an example from a riot in the United States during the time. I forget which one it quite is, but either way, it's from around the age of industry, and people rioted because they wanted better working conditions, they wanted better pay, better living conditions, and all those things. And we'll begin to see a change in that. We'll talk about that later on in this unit when we talk about reforms that are going to come about during the age of industry as well. But for the current moment, there's not many changes that are going to benefit people in terms of healthy living conditions and things and safe working conditions. All right, so let me know if you have any questions. Please try your best on the questions that follow, and I'll hopefully see and talk to you guys soon.